The emergency transmission pierced through the silence of Deep Space Station Alpha like a knife through flesh, shattering the mundane routine of another quiet night shift. Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been enjoying his third cup of coffee while monitoring the deep space frequencies, expecting nothing more exciting than asteroid mining reports or routine cargo manifests. The ceramic mug slipped from his fingers as if in slow motion, exploding against the steel floor in a shower of fragments and steaming liquid. But Morrison barely noticed the mess. His entire world had just been turned upside down by a voice that carried the weight of dying civilizations. Please, anyone who can hear this. We are the Valdari of the Outer Rim. The alien voice crackled through the universal translator, each word dripping with raw terror and desperation that needed no translation. Our children are dying. Crimson Horde burns our worlds to ash. We have tried to fight, but we are healers, builders, teachers, not killers. Morrison's hand instinctively moved to his throat, feeling his pulse hammering against his palm. In 15 years of deep space monitoring, he'd never heard anything like this. The Federation protocols were clear about first contact situations, but this wasn't first contact. This was a death scream echoing across the void. If any civilization has warriors, we beg you, save us. Offer everything we have. Our technology, our knowledge, our very souls if necessary. Please, our children have nowhere left to run. The transmission wavered, static eating at the edges of the signal like digital decay. Through the interference, Morrison could hear something that made his blood run cold, the sound of explosions in the background, distant screams, and what might have been a child crying. These weren't actors or politicians making diplomatic overtures. These were real people facing real death, and they were broadcasting their final moments to an empty universe. You know what's funny about bureaucracy? It never fails to disappoint. When lives are on the line, the holographic display flickered to life, showing the source of the transmission, dozens of civilian ships fleeing through space in a chaotic exodus. Their vessels looked like floating cities, massive structures designed for peaceful exploration rather than warfare. Pursuing them were the mechanical predators of the Crimson Horde, dark angular ships that seemed to devour light itself. Contrast was stark and terrifying. Civilization, fleeing from pure destruction. Morrison's training kicked in as he began recording everything. The tactical analysis painted a grim picture. The Valdari ships were broadcasting on all frequencies, their distress calls getting weaker with each passing minute. Long-range sensors showed the Horde vessels systematically destroying anything too slow to escape. This wasn't warfare, it was extermination. The transmission cut to static, leaving only the sound of Morrison's racing heartbeat and the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. The silence felt heavier than the void outside, pregnant, with the weight of worlds dying while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Morrison's hands trembled as he reached for the emergency comm panel. The Galactic Federation had already voted on the Valdari situation 3 days ago. He'd read the classified briefing, non-interference in primitive conflicts. They'd debated for hours about sovereignty and the Prime Directive while people were being murdered. The Federation's response? Form a committee to study the situation. Politicians and their committees solving tomorrow's problems yesterday, as usual, but humanity wasn't part of the Federation. They'd been rejected twice for membership, labeled as too aggressive and militaristically unpredictable. The same qualities that made them unwelcome in galactic politics might just make them the Valdara's salvation. Morrison's finger hovered over the emergency beacon. Once he pushed that button, there would be no going back. The Terran Defense Force would mobilize, and when humans mobilized for war, the galaxy paid attention. He thought about his daughter Sarah, safe in her school on Earth, learning about art and mathematics instead of running from killers. Every Valdari child deserved the same chance. The button clicked under his finger with a sound like thunder. Emergency command. This is Deep Space Station Alpha. Priority Alpha emergency. Get me Admiral Jackson immediately. His voice cracked with urgency as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Tell him we have a code red situation. Genocidal attack in progress. Civilian population requesting immediate military assistance. communications officer's face appeared on screen, eyes wide with shock. Sir Admiral Jackson is in conference with the Joint Chiefs. Should I interrupt? Morrison looked at the tactical display where Faldari ships were winking out of existence one by one. Each lost signal represented thousands of innocent lives. Son, if you don't interrupt that meeting in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to come down there and interrupt it myself with a plasma cutter. While the connection established, Morrison began composing a response to the Faldari. His fingers flew over the keyboard, knowing that every second counted. The message had to be perfect, strong enough to give them hope, honest enough to prepare them for what was coming. The reply burst across subspace toward the fleeing Faldari ships, carrying with it the full weight of human determination. Morrison's voice turned cold as winter's steel as he activated the transmitter, thinking of his daughter. Thinking of all the children who deserved to grow up in a universe where monsters couldn't hunt them with impunity. Oh, this is Lieutenant Morrison. Of the Terran Defense Force. Message received and understood. You are not alone. The cavalry is coming, and we're bringing more than you asked for. Hold on. Help is 48 hours away. As the transmission ended, Morrison realized he'd just committed his entire species to war. The Faldari had asked for help, and humanity had never been particularly good at half measures. When humans answered a call for help, they didn't send care packages or diplomatic missions. They sent battleships. The question that would haunt the galaxy for generations was simple. What happens when you threaten someone under human protection? The Crimson Horde was about to find out. The answer would reshape the balance of power across 1,000 star systems. Speaking of power and transformation, it's just like compound interest changes everything in finance. Small actions in space can create massive consequences across the galaxy. Click the end screen to discover how the power of compounding works in your own life. Admiral Thomas Jackson stood before the largest human fleet ever assembled, his weathered face hard as granite in the blue glow of the war room. The holographic displays cast dancing shadows across his battle-scarred features, each line telling a story of conflicts fought and won across the outer colonies. Behind him, a tactical display showed a sight that would have made any galactic power pause in recognition-aiding battleships. 40 destroyers, 60 fighters, and enough firepower to crack a moon in half. But Jackson wasn't thinking about the raw destructive power at his disposal. He was thinking about the children. The Faldari sent us their entire database, Jackson began, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. The assembled officers leaned forward, sensing the gravity in their commander's tone. Medical advances that could cure cancer overnight. Energy technology that puts our fusion reactors to shame. Agricultural techniques that could feed 1 billion people with a handful of seeds. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the room. They think they're buying a few patrol ships. Poor bastards have no idea what they've just unleashed. You know what's interesting about desperate people? They always underestimate what they're truly worth. Colonel Sarah Williams stepped forward from the crowd of officers. Her scarred face twisted with barely contained rage. The burn marks running down her left cheek were souvenirs from the Proxima incident, a reminder of what happened when humanity's enemies targeted civilians. Sir, these Crimson Horde animals have already glassed 6 worlds, billions dead. Children burned alive in their schools while their parents watched helplessly. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Every officer present had read the intelligence reports, seen the satellite footage of cities turned to ash and glass. But hearing it spoken aloud, seeing the fury in William's eyes, made it real in a way that tactical briefings never could. Jackson's smile was terrifying, not because it was cruel, but because it was genuinely happy. Then they've made their biggest mistake. They hurt someone who asked us for help. He activated the fleet display with a gesture that seemed almost casual, but the effect was anything but. The 3-dimensional hologram expanded to fill the center of the room, showing the assembled armada in all its terrible glory. The Terran Defense Force had pulled ships from every sector, stripping colony defense fleets bare to create this monument to human warfare. The centerpiece was the battleship Retribution, a kilometer-long beast of metal and fury that had been Jackson's flagship for the past 5 years. Its main guns could punch through a planet's crust, and its fighter bays held enough bombers to level a continent. Surrounding it were the destroyers, smaller, faster, but no less deadly. Each one carried enough missiles to turn a city into a crater. "Look at this beautiful sight," Jackson said, his voice carrying the pride of a craftsman showing off his finest work. "The Vengeance, fresh from the shipyards at Mars, the Unforgiving, which hasn't lost a single engagement in 12 years. The Wrath of Earth, whose crew volunteered for this mission before we even announced it. But it was the fighter squadrons that truly represented humanity's approach to warfare. 60 of the most advanced combat aircraft ever built, each one piloted by men and women who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. They didn't just fly their ships, they became them. Human reflexes enhanced by neural interfaces that made them extensions of their machines." Captain Mike Rodriguez, the wing commander, stood at attention near the display. His flight suit bore the patches of 17 different campaigns, each one a story of victory against impossible odds. "Sir, the pilots are ready. We've been running combat simulations for the past 6 hours. The Horde's tactical patterns are predictable. They rely on fear and overwhelming force against defenseless targets. But they've never faced pilots who learned to fight in Earth's atmosphere," Jackson replied, his grin widening. "Gravity wells, weather patterns, three-dimensional. Combat in environments that would kill most species. Our worst training day is better than their best combat scenario." The intelligence reports painted a clear picture of the Crimson Horde's strategy. They were scavengers, feeding on civilizations that had forgotten how to fight. The Valdari were perfect victims, peaceful, advanced, but completely unprepared for the reality of warfare. The Horde had swept through their systems like a plague, taking what they wanted and destroying the rest. What they hadn't counted on was that their distress call would reach the one species in the galaxy that had never forgotten how to wage war. Colonel Williams brought up the tactical analysis on her personal display. "Sir, our weapon systems are completely incompatible with known galactic technology. They use energy shields designed to deflect plasma and particle beams. Our kinetic weapons will go through their defenses like they're made of paper." "That's because they are made of paper," Jackson replied, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who had seen this scenario play out before. "Energy weapons are elegant, clean, efficient, perfect for a civilized galaxy that's forgotten what real violence looks like." He gestured to the weapons display, showing the railguns and missile systems that formed the backbone of human military doctrine. Kinetic weapons are messy, brutal, and completely unstoppable. You can't negotiate with a chunk of metal moving at 30% of light speed. You can't reason with it, deflect it, or wish it away. It just hits you, and you die. The room erupted in nervous laughter, the kind that soldiers share when they know they're about to do something incredibly dangerous and completely necessary. "In 48 hours, we jump to intercept," Jackson announced, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Valdari think they're getting a rescue mission. They've seen the Federation's response to crisis committees, negotiations, diplomatic protests that arrive 3 weeks after the genocide is complete." He paused, letting his eyes sweep across every face in the room. These were his people, men and women who had volunteered to carry humanity's reputation across the stars. They understood what was at stake better than any politician or diplomat ever could. "They're getting an extinction event," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the room with the weight of prophecy. "The Crimson Horde is about to learn why humans are the only species that weaponized their own extinction and survived." The fleet would depart in 48 hours, carrying with it the hopes of a dying civilization and the fury of a species that had never learned to ignore a cry for help. The Valdari had asked for warriors. Humanity was about to show them what warriors really looked like, just like compound interest. Small actions in warfare can create massive consequences that echo across generations. The Valdari's desperate plea was about to compound into something the galaxy had never seen before. Click the end screen to discover how the power of compounding works in your own life and transforms everything it touches. The Crimson Horde flagship. Death's Embrace detected the human fleet dropping out of hyperspace and immediately began laughing. Not the nervous laughter of soldiers before battle, but the cruel, confident amusement of predators who had found new prey wandering into their territory. The massive ship's bridge erupted in chittering sounds that passed for mirth among the horde's twisted hierarchy. Warlord Brutus Rex lounged in his command throne. A grotesque fusion of alien biology and mechanical enhancement that had been built from the bones of his enemies. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the tactical display, scanning the approaching human vessels with the casual interest of a cat watching mice scurry across an open field. 50 ships? Rex snarled to his bridge crew, his voice carrying the arrogance of a conqueror who had never faced real opposition. These fools dare challenge the horde with museum pieces. Look at those pathetic, hull-screwed metal construction. Basic energy signatures. Outdated weapon systems that my grandfather would have laughed at. The bridge crew joined in their master's amusement. Their various species united in their complete confidence in horde superiority. They had good reason to be confident. The Crimson Horde had swept through 14 star systems in the past year, crushing every defense force they encountered. The Valdari had lasted longer than most, but even they were down to their last few. Refugee ships. Send the terror wing to scatter them like leaves, Rex commanded with a dismissive wave of his mechanical claw. Make it quick. I want to finish harvesting the Valdari before these primitives waste any more of our time. But as the first human destroyer, the relentless closed distance, something impossible happened. The ship didn't retreat. It didn't broadcast surrender messages. It didn't even slow down. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the horde formation with the single-minded determination of a missile seeking its target. You know what they say about assumptions. They make you dead in space combat. The horde heavy cruiser Skullcrusher moved to intercept its massive form bristling with weapon systems that had reduced entire cities to molten slag. Captain Vextel, the ship's commander, opened fire with plasma cannons hot enough to melt steel, confident that this single volley would vaporize the primitive human vessel and send the rest of their fleet fleeing in terror. The plasma beams struck the relentless head-on, and for a moment, the human ship disappeared in a brilliant cascade of superheated energy. The horde crew cheered, already turning their attention to the next target. But as the plasma dissipated, the Relentless emerged from the fire, shields glowing but intact, its hull unmarked by the devastating attack. The cheering stopped, abruptly. Then the Relentless fired back. The railgun rounds erupted from the human destroyer's main batteries like the wrath of an angry god. There was no warning, no dramatic charge-up sequence, no glowing energy buildup that advertised the incoming attack, just solid projectiles accelerating at 30% light speed, carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through a small moon. The rounds struck the Skullcrusher amidships, and the effect was catastrophic. The horde ship's armor, designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb plasma impacts, might as well have been tissue paper. The railgun projectiles carved through the hull like hot knives through butter, detonating the ship's reactor and ammunition stores in a chain reaction that turned the massive cruiser into a brilliant fireball that lit up the void. The explosion was so violent that it knocked nearby horde ships off course, their crews stunned by the sudden destruction of one of their most powerful vessels. Debris from the Skullcrusher peppered the surrounding fleet, leaving scorch marks on hulls that had seemed invincible moments before. Rex's jaw dropped, his cybernetic eye flickering as it tried to process what it had just witnessed. What kind of weapons are these? His tactical officer, a nervous creature whose species had joined the horde rather than face extinction, stammered over the sensor readings. Sir, the projectiles appear to be solid matter, not energy. There. Using kinetic weapons' actual physical ammunition fired at relativistic speeds. Impossible, Rex snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. No civilized species uses kinetic weapons. They're primitive, wasteful, inefficient. Sir, the tactical officer continued, his voice shaking. Our shields are designed to deflect energy attacks. These kinetic projectiles are passing right through our defensive systems. They're not even registering as weapons until they hit. The reality of the situation began to sink in across the horde fleet. They had built their military doctrine around energy weapons, elegant, clean, efficient tools that could be precisely controlled and easily countered by opponents who understood the technology. Their shields, their armor, their entire strategic philosophy was based on energy warfare. But kinetic weapons were different. They were crude, brutal, and completely unstoppable. You couldn't negotiate with a chunk of metal moving at 30% of light speed. You couldn't deflect it with shields designed for plasma beams. You couldn't reason with it or wish it away. It just hit you, and you died. On the human flagship, Admiral Jackson watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Relentless had just fired the opening shot in what would become known as the Battle of Valdari Prime. And the results were exactly what he had expected. They never learned kinetic warfare, Jackson observed to his bridge crew. His voice carrying the calm professionalism of a teacher explaining a simple concept. Energy weapons and plasma. Amateurs. His tactical officer, Commander Lisa Chen, pulled up the analysis of the Horde fleet's defensive systems. Sir, their shields are completely useless against our weapons. Our intelligence was correct. They've never encountered kinetic warfare on this scale. Jackson nodded, unsurprised. The Crimson Horde had built their reputation on terrorizing civilizations that had forgotten how to fight. They were scavengers, feeding on the weak and defenseless. But they had never faced an opponent that remembered war's most fundamental truth, sometimes the simplest. Solutions are the most effective. Open a channel to the Horde fleet, Jackson commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had never lost a battle. Let's see if they're smart enough to recognize a superior force when they see one. The communication array crackled to life, broadcasting Jackson's message across the battlefield on all frequencies. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute confidence and the promise of inevitable destruction. This is Admiral Jackson of the Terran Navy. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from Valdari space. Refuse and learn why humans are the only species that turned war into an art form. The message hung in the void between the two fleets. Challenge that would determine the fate of not just the Valdari, but the entire galactic balance of power. The Crimson Horde had built their empire on fear and overwhelming force against defenseless targets. But now, they faced an enemy that had been forged in the fires of their own world wars, tempered by centuries of conflict and refined by the absolute necessity of survival. The next few minutes would determine whether the Horde would retreat and preserve their fleet, or whether they would learn the hard way that some species had never forgotten how to wage total war, just like compound interest. Small tactical advantages in warfare can create massive shifts in power that echo across generations. The human fleet's technological edge was about to compound into something that would reshape the galaxy forever. Click the end screen to discover how the power of compounding works in your own life and transforms everything it touches. The battle raged for 8 hours across the Valdari home system, transforming the peaceful star system into a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. What had begun as the Crimson Horde's routine extermination mission had devolved into something far more terrifying, a systematic demonstration of what happened when predators encountered an apex species that had never forgotten how to hunt. Crimson Horde, used to terrorizing defenseless civilians and overwhelming primitive defense forces, found themselves facing an enemy that had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. These weren't the peaceful scientists and farmers. They were accustomed to slaughtering. These were the descendants of a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times and learned from every mistake. Captain Mike Rodriguez piloted his fighter through the wreckage of 4 Horde dreadnoughts. Their massive holes split open, like rotten fruit, spilling atmosphere and bodies into the void. His voice crackled over the cum with the calm professionalism of a man who had done this dance too many times to count. Wolfpack, form up on my 6. We're going for their command ship. Rodriguez's fighter, the Reaper, was a work of art in motion, a sleek predator that moved through space with lethal grace. Behind him, 11 other fighters fell into formation, their pilots responding with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The human fighters moved like death itself. There. Pilots trained from birth in three-dimensional combat that would have driven most species insane. Earth's children learned to fly in gravity wells. navigating weather patterns and atmospheric turbulence that made space combat seem almost peaceful by comparison. They slipped between the massive alien vessels like sharks among minnows, their antimatter torpedoes carving through holes, designed to inspire fear rather than withstand focused assault. "Reaper 2, you've got 3 fighters on your tail," Rodriguez called out, his eyes never leaving his targeting display. "Break left and dive. I'll clean them up." "Copy that, Reaper Leader." These guys fly like they learned in a simulator. That was the problem. The Horde pilots had learned to fight against opponents who followed predictable patterns, who broadcasted their intentions, who fought with honor and restraint. Human pilots had learned to fight against other human beings who would use every dirty trick, every psychological advantage, every moment of hesitation to gain the upper hand. You know what's funny about honor in combat? It's a luxury that dead heroes can't afford. The Reaper rolled inverted and accelerated toward a formation of Horde interceptors, its pilot's neural interface allowing him to think and react at speeds that defied biological limitations. Rodriguez's thoughts became the fighter's actions, his reflexes enhanced by technology that turned him into something more than human. The antimatter torpedo struck the lead Horde ship dead center, and the explosion was beautiful in its completeness. The alien vessels simply ceased to exist, converted into pure energy in a flash that temporarily blinded the surrounding fighters. The shockwave sent the other Horde ships tumbling out of formation, their pilots struggling to regain control. But Rodriguez was already gone, his fighter dancing through the debris field toward the next target. Behind him, the wolf pack spread out in a hunting formation that had been perfected over decades of combat against the most dangerous opponents in the galaxy. Other Humes, aboard the Valdari refugee ship Hope's Light, Elder Corvain watched the tactical feeds with a mixture of awe and horror. The elderly alien's forearms trembled as he witnessed the systematic annihilation of the force that had been hunting his people for months. His large, gentle eyes, evolved for studying star charts and reading ancient texts, now watched the most efficient display of warfare he had ever seen. "They fight like demons," he whispered to his aide, his voice barely audible over the sound of explosions echoing through space. "Look at them. They don't just destroy the enemy ships, they hunt them. They pursue fleeing vessels and execute them with precision that borders on artistic." His aide, a younger Valdari named Zephyr, studied the tactical feeds with wide eyes that reflected the fire of dying ships. "Elder, I don't think they're demons. I think there's something worse." What could be worse than demons? Professionals. And that was exactly what the Crimson Horde was discovering. They had built their reputation on fear, on overwhelming force, applied against defenseless targets. Their ships were designed to look intimidating, their weapons built to cause maximum terror rather than maximum efficiency. They had never faced an opponent that treated war as a science rather than an art. Of intimidation, the human fleet moved with mechanical precision, each ship fulfilling its role in a symphony of destruction that had been rehearsed countless times in war colleges and simulation chambers. The battleships provided heavy fire support, their rail, guns reaching out across impossible distances to shatter Horde capital ships. The destroyers hunted in packs, their speed and maneuverability, allowing them to exploit every weakness in the enemy formation. But it was the fighters that truly demonstrated humanity's approach to warfare. They didn't just attack, they stalked. They didn't just fight, they executed. Every movement was calculated, every shot precisely aimed, every maneuver designed to maximize damage while minimizing risk. On the human flagship, Admiral Jackson watched the tactical display with the satisfaction of a chess master watching his opponent's king fall into checkmate. The Horde command ship Death's Embrace was burning like a funeral pyre, its massive hull venting atmosphere and bodies into the void. The ship that had been the terror of 14 star systems was now a dying monument to the futility of challenging human military doctrine. Sir Commander Chen reported, her voice carrying a note of professional admiration. "The Horde fleet is attempting to retreat. Shall we pursue?" Jackson's smile was cold as winter starlight. "Signal all vessels. No prisoners. No survivors. We need to send a message that will echo across every star system in this galaxy. The order went out across the human fleet, and the response was immediate. The retreating horde ships found themselves pursued by an enemy that had no intention of letting them escape. Human fighters swarmed around the fleeing vessels like angry hornets, their weapon systems lighting up the darkness with deadly precision. But Sir Chen continued, "Isn't that a violation of the Geneva Convention? The laws of war?" Jackson turned to face his tactical officer, and his expression was utterly without mercy. "Commander, the Geneva Convention applies to wars between civilized nations. This isn't war. This is pest control." The last horde ship died in a brilliant flash of light, its reactor overloading under the sustained assault of human weapons. The Faldari system fell silent except for the gentle hum of human ships moving through the debris field, their crews already beginning the process of search and rescue for any Valdari survivors. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. News of the Crimson Horde's destruction would spread across the galaxy, carrying with it a simple message. Humanity had arrived. And the rules of engagement had fundamentally changed. The Faldari had asked for help, and humanity had delivered. Something far more valuable than rescue. They had delivered justice, wrapped in the terrible beauty of absolute military superiority. The galaxy would never be the same. Just like compound interest, small victories in warfare can create massive shifts in galactic power that echo across generations. The human fleet's decisive victory was about to compound into something that would reshape the balance of power across 1,000 star systems. Click the end screen to discover how the power of compounding works in your own life and transforms everything it touches. 1 month later, the Valdari colony ship, New Beginning, docked with the human medical frigate Mercy, and the contrast between the two vessels told the entire story of humanity's arrival in galactic affairs. The Valdari ship was a thing of beauty, its flowing lines and organic curves that spoke of a civilization that had spent millennia perfecting the art of peaceful exploration. The human frigate was pure function over form, every angle and surface, designed for maximum efficiency in the brutal calculus of interstellar warfare. Elder Corvain walked slowly through the corridors of the Mercy, his wounds still healing from the desperate evacuation of Valdari Prime. His forearms moved carefully, supporting his elderly frame as he marveled at the cold efficiency of human engineering. Every surface served multiple purposes, every design choice optimized for survival in the harshest environments the galaxy could offer. The medical bay where he had spent the past week recovering was a testament to human pragmatism. The equipment was advanced beyond anything the Faldari had imagined, but it was built like a fortress designed to function even when the ship was under attack. Even when death was stalking the corridors, these weren't the tools of a peaceful species. These were the instruments of a civilization that had learned to heal and kill with equal expertise. "Your people certainly know how to build things that last," Corvain remarked to the human medic who had been treating his injuries. The young woman, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, smiled with the kind of professional warmth that came from years of treating trauma patients. "We learned early that pretty doesn't matter if it breaks when you need it most," she replied, checking the healing progress on his injuries. "Our ancestors built things to survive wars, famines, and disasters. We kept that tradition when we went to the stars." Admiral Jackson met him in the observation deck, where the rebuilt Faldari defense stations gleamed in the light of their twin suns. The structures were new, built with human technology and defended by human weapons platforms that could have held off the entire Crimson Horde single-handedly. But they were beautiful in their own way, a marriage of Valdari aesthetics and human engineering that created something neither species could have achieved alone. "Your people are safe, Elder," Jackson said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a job well done. "The Horde remnants have fled beyond the galactic edge. Our long-range patrols report that they're not stopping to regroup. They're running as fast as their ships can carry them." Corvain stared out at the defense stations, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of what had transpired. A month ago, his people had been facing extinction. Now they were under the protection of the Azit, most feared military force in the galaxy. The transformation was so complete it felt like a dream. Admiral Corvain's voice shook with emotion. "We offered our technology for a rescue, You brought us total war. Why, you know what's interesting about gratitude. Sometimes it comes with a side of existential confusion. Jackson stared out at the stars, his battle-scarred face thoughtful in the light of the twin suns. The man who had orchestrated the destruction of an entire battle fleet looked almost peaceful. As he contemplated the vastness of space, because someone who's never had to fight for their life can't understand what it means to fight for someone else's, he turned to face the alien elder, his eyes like winter ice that had seen too much and forgiven too little. The Galactic Federation sees intervention as disrupting the natural order. They hold committee meetings while children die. They debate sovereignty while worlds burn. They're so concerned with not picking sides that they've forgotten what sides are worth picking. Corvain absorbed this, his large eyes reflecting the starlight as he tried to understand the human perspective. But you're not part of the Federation? You had no obligation to help us? That's exactly why we could help you, Jackson replied. We're not bound by their rules about non-interference. We're not paralyzed by their fear of setting precedents. When someone asks for help, we give it. When someone threatens those under our protection, we eliminate the threat. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Chen, who approached with the kind of urgent efficiency that marked all human military communications. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The word is spreading faster than we anticipated. Jackson nodded, unsurprised. What are they saying? It's mixed reactions, as expected. The Federation is calling us reckless interventionists and dangerous militarists. The consortium is worried about their trade routes being disrupted, but the smaller civilizations... Chen paused, consulting her datapad. They're calling us heroes. And that was the real revolution. For the first time in galactic history, a major military power had intervened not for resources or territory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The implications were staggering, and every government in the galaxy was scrambling. To understand what this meant for the established order, as word of the Faldari liberation spread across the galaxy, a new phrase entered every language: don't make them call the humans. It started as a joke among traders and diplomats, but it quickly became something more serious. The phrase represented a fundamental shift in galactic politics, the knowledge that there was now a power in the galaxy that couldn't be bought, negotiated with, or reasoned out of protecting the innocent. The Terran Navy had announced their presence to the cosmos, not with diplomacy or trade, but with a simple, terrifying message. Touch those who ask for our help, and face total annihilation. It was a promise that carried the weight of absolute certainty. Backed by the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. You've changed everything, Corvain said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. The balance of power, the rules of engagement, the very nature of galactic civilization. What happens now? Jackson's smile was enigmatic.
I'll be fine.
Out what the galaxy looks like when the bullies know there's someone bigger and stronger watching. We find out what happens when the strong can't prey on the weak with impunity. Within weeks, the effects began to ripple across the galaxy. The consortium's slave raids suddenly became much less frequent. The Federation's committee meetings became much more decisive. Pirates and warlords who had operated with impunity for decades suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders, wondering if their next victim might have friends in high places. But perhaps most importantly, the small civilizations, the farmers, the scientists, the artists who had always lived in fear of the strong, began to hope. They began to believe that the galaxy could be more than a hunting ground for predators. They began to understand that sometimes the cavalry really does arrive in time. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy trembled. But it wasn't the trembling of fear alone. It was the trembling of a universe on the brink of transformation, where the old rules no longer applied, and the strong could no longer prey on the weak. Without consequences, the age of human intervention had begun, and nothing would ever be the same, just like compound interest. Small acts of justice can create massive transformations that echo across generations. The human fleet's intervention was about to compound into something that would reshape the moral fabric of the galaxy itself. Click the end screen to discover how the power of compounding works in your own life and transforms everything it touches at the end.